My name is Mike Hoffman. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Business Ethics here at Bentley College. And I want to thank you all for coming to the 5th Business Ethics Lectureship sponsored by Raytheon. We're very pleased to have you, and we think that you're going to be excited in hearing our speaker today. Mr. Eskew, who I'll introduce momentarily, will speak for about 20 minutes to a half an hour, and then we'll have some questions and answers. And he's made it very clear to me, even though he will take a few questions from the business leaders that we have, our VIP section, he really wants to hear from students. And he really wants to have students ask him questions and get dialogue with students. So I'm going to be giving priority to student hands that go up. We'll have microphones on either side so that if you will not ask the question till the microphone gets there, then everybody will be able to hear your question when we get to the Q&A. There will be a reception in the foyer, which is on this floor, right after the talk, to which you're all invited. And I hope all of you come. You'll have an opportunity, many of you, to say hello to Mr. Eskew and talk with each other about the ideas that you learned about in the lecture and in the Q&A. I'm pleased to say that through Bentley's partnership with WGBH, this lecture is being filmed, and you will be able to watch it again, or others who you might encourage to watch it, on the web by going to wgbh.org/forum, and you'll find it in the Business and Economics section. Don't be shy. Come on down. There's more seats down here. The Raytheon Lectureship in Business Ethics at Bentley College is made possible through the generous support of Raytheon Company. Raytheon, as probably all of you know, is an industry leader in defense and government electronics, space, information technology, technical services, and business aviation and special mission aircraft, with annual revenues of more than $20 billion. The company employs over 80,000 people worldwide. It has built a reputation for adhering to the highest ethical standards in the industry. This lectureship, which is sponsored by Raytheon, aims to illuminate and promote ethical values and conduct in business, highlighting best practices in corporations throughout the United States and abroad. Past speakers in the Raytheon series include Ray Gilmartin, CEO and Chairman of Merck, Mike Rutgers, Chairman of EMC, Jamie Gorelick, Independent Board Member of UTC, and Ann Mulcahy, Chairman and CEO of Xerox. I don't know if Patty Ellis is with us yet today. She's supposed to come over. I wanted to just briefly acknowledge her leadership in sponsoring this Raytheon Business Ethics Lectureship series. Patty has been here to almost each of the lectures in the past. She's Vice President of Business Ethics and Compliance of Raytheon and responsible for providing leadership and direction to effectively integrate the company's high standards of ethical conduct into all aspects of company business. She's been the Chief Ethics Officer at Raytheon since 1994. It's now my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, who joins that rather illustrious group of past Raytheon speakers, and that's Michael Eskew, who serves as Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of UPS. I even wore my brown suit today. UPS being the world's largest package delivery company and a global leader in supply chain services. Under Mr. Eskew's direction, UPS is expanding its capabilities into new lines of business that complement the company's global package delivery operations. UPS is developing increasingly sophisticated solutions for its customers by synchronizing the movement of goods, information, and funds. These expanded capabilities include multimodal transportation services, sophisticated technologies, international trade management, supply chain consulting, and financial services. So you can see the diversity that Mr. Eskew has brought to UPS since coming on board as chairman and chief executive officer. Mr. Eskew graduated from Purdue University with a bachelor's degree in industrial engineering. He also completed the advanced management program at the Wharton School of Business. He began his UPS career in 1972 and has been a member of UPS's board of directors since 1998. In addition to his corporate responsibilities, Mr. Eskew is a trustee of the UPS Foundation and the Annie E. Casey Foundation, which is the country's largest foundation dedicated to disadvantaged youth. In 2003, Mr. Eskew was appointed to the President's Export Council and was elected chairman of the U.S.-China Business Council in 2004. He also serves on the board of directors of 3M Corporation and IBM, and is chair of the Business Strengthening America's Steering Committee. His title of his speech today is The Ethics of Globalization, Oyxmoron, and those in business ethics have heard that word a few times, or Path to Peace and Prosperity. Please join me in welcoming Michael Eskew.
Thank you, Mike, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure for me to be here. Bentley has done more to advance the dialogue of business ethics than perhaps any institution in the world, and I'm honored to be just part of that discussion. I spend a lot of time on college campuses. This must be the 15th or 16th trip I've made in the last couple of years. In fact, earlier this morning I was over at Clark University in Worcester taking part in the graduate student discussion. 2 weeks ago I was at the Fuqua School at Duke. I've spoken to campuses in Europe at INSEAD and Tsinghua in China over the last few months. In 2 weeks I'll be back at a conference in Shanghai that we're starting with one of the major universities in China. I can't seem to get away from campuses. I hope I never graduate. Obviously, I get a lot out of this. I'm inspired by your energy, your enthusiasm, your youth, and your new ideas. Hopefully, I'm going to give you something back this afternoon. Just one of the things I'm often asked to talk about on college campuses is on my personal management lessons that I've learned throughout my career. I'm not going to go through that today because I have something else to talk about, but I normally take students on a typical 33-year journey in about 10 minutes and explain all the dramatic changes that have occurred since Michael talked about 1972. And you can think of some of those big changes right off the top of your head. Things like the internet and cell phones, the IT and biotechnology revolutions, the fall of communism, the rise of China and India and other developing economies, and the increased threat of terror. And the list goes on. And as dramatic as those changes are, they pale in comparison to what you're going to see over the next 10 years. The National Intelligence Committee issued a global report a few years ago titled Global Trends 2015. It details the biggest issues affecting the overall development and stability of the world in the next 10 years. Areas such as health and energy, food and water, population growth, biotechnology, IT, environmental, economic development, and of course, global trade. Listen to just a few of those projections. By 2015, just 10 years from now, the world's population will have grown by another billion people to 7.2 billion people. 95% of that growth will be in urban areas in developing countries. Only one city in the United States will count itself among the top 20 urban areas in the world, and that's New York City. By 2015, only 10% of the Persian Gulf oil will go to Western countries. 75% will go to Asia. By 2015, global economic growth will grow at a faster pace, not raw numbers, but a faster pace on a percentage basis than any time in our history, including those rapid growth years in the 60s and 70s, when the base was much smaller. And by 2015, globalization, the increased movement of goods and funds and information and people across national borders, will increase transparencies of government decision makers. That factor will make it awfully hard for authoritarian and unethical regimes and keep transparency moving forward. And that last point, globalization, goods and information and funds and people crossing borders are becoming more integrated among nations. And that's what I really want to talk about this afternoon, specifically the ethics of globalization. Someone from college came up with a pretty creative title. I don't think it was me. Ethical globalization, Oyxmoron, our path to peace and prosperity. And that debate has been around for hundreds of years. Immanuel Kant, back in the 1700s, argued that no nation may dispense with individual rights without violating the universal moral code. Kant's so-called categorical imperative laid out the groundwork for more modern philosophers like Peter Singer, who argues that as people in the world become inextricably linked, so too must justice, which governs relationship among all nations. Tom Friedman took it another step, and when he points out that no two nations that have McDonald's have ever gone to war with each other. But what I like the best is what Cordell Hall, FDR's Secretary of State, said. And he said that when goods cross borders, armies don't. For the record, I'm not a philosopher or a politician. There's a whole lot of folks that are more qualified for that discussion on those various ethic movements. But as a business person, and as a father, and a citizen, and someone who cares deeply about global trade and global prosperity and global harmony, I can't think that there is more pressing ethical issue today than preparing people, the next generation, for a world that is coming closer together through trade. Quite frankly, it would be unethical not to do this. We all have to ask ourselves a number of questions. Are we as a nation producing enough global trade specialists, engineers, material researchers, and other professions that is so much in demand in the global economy? Are we as a nation doing enough to promote trade literacy? Are we doing enough to promote the study of Chinese and Hindu languages? Now, my most recent trip to China, I heard an interesting statistic. And it said there are more people today learning English in China than those that speak English in the U.S. We also have to ask ourselves another question. Are we ready and are we doing everything we can to prepare our people and our society for a world that is going to be so very different in the next 10 years? If you pressed me to answer those 4 questions, I think I'd have to answer no. And if that situation lingers, it indeed becomes more than a problem. It becomes an ethical issue. Now, I recognize the notion of globalization doesn't sit well everywhere on college campuses. It was just 5 years ago, almost to this week, that the streets of Seattle were flooded with tens of thousands of anti-global protesters who blocked traffic, waved signs, and shut down the opening ceremonies of the World Trade Organization. And since then, we've seen similar disruptions around the globe. Globalization and global corporations make people very angry. And you've undoubtedly heard some of the chants from those folks. Number one, globalization and the imports it creates destroys jobs and economies. Number two, global companies in search of cheap labor exploit workers in developing countries. Number three, global companies help destroy the environment in developing countries. Number four, globalization widens the gap between rich and poor nations. And number five, globalization hurts the quality of life. And I could go on and on. And I could go down that list and give you plenty of statistics and evidence to debunk all those arguments. And then someone could come up right after me and contradict everything that I've just said with their own set of statistics and arguments. But honestly, debating the merits of globalization is more like debating the merits of gravity. It's just happening. It's been going on for centuries. It will increasingly go on exponentially over the course of your careers. We just have to prepare for it. What is worth discussing and what is valid ethical issue is ensuring that globalization moves along the right path, the beneficial path, the path that brings the greatest goodwill to the greatest number of people all around the world. I mentioned earlier about a conference that we're hosting a couple of weeks from now in Shanghai. It's actually the fourth installment in places that we've had conferences in New York and Paris and Chicago. The purpose of this event is to examine issues in global trade and global supply chains. And we've heard from some very interesting viewpoints from people as diverse as Václav Havel, Jimmy Carter, F.W. de Klerk, Tom Friedman, and Bob Rubin. And while each of their views on what must be done to ensure positive global trading relationships all agree, globalization is an inevitable and natural course of events. They also argue that it's a neutral force. Their challenge to all of us is that we must charge it in a positive manner. So in that vein, as you prepare for your careers in business and other roles in leadership, I thought it might be appropriate to share with you some of the lessons that we've learned at UPS about trying to create a positive climate for success for everything we do and everyone we touch in our global business. Specifically, we've learned three things about positive globalization that we believe have universal applications. Number one, we've learned that long-term commitments are rewarded. Number two, we've learned to think local, but act global, and that's a twist on that traditional phrase. And number three, we've learned that if you are perceived as an extractor, as opposed to an integrator, you're in big trouble. So let's start with thinking about long-term and making those solid long-term commitments. Our first international expansion outside of North America occurred when we went to Germany back in 1976. I was on that original development team. We knew we had a, as we say in Indiana, long road to hoe in terms of building an international network. That would take a long time before it was profitable. In fact, our international profits didn't occur for 22 years. We had red ink internationally for 22 years. That did require a long-term view. In Europe, we saw as far back as the middle 80s the inevitability of a single economic union. We made 16 acquisitions to establish our brand and to build our capabilities. In fact, we built Europeans' largest pan-continental delivery network in the 1980s. We could offer consistent service within and across national boundaries, all supported by common integrated systems. By 1996, the concept of shipping across the continent, even around the world, had for the first time in Europe become as easy as shipping across town. So taking that long-term view enabled us to become part of a commercial infrastructure for Europe. It's been the catalyst for creating 26,000 jobs for Europeans. And we've taken a similar approach in Asia. Our strategy was to build our Asian network through phases, each one building systemically over on the last. The growth was to create a flexible, nimble business model that could adapt to changing business and economic conditions. And after doing business in Asia for 16 years, UPS Asia has offered our customers new opportunities, new solutions in new lands. One of the biggest factors in that success was our willingness to give up some control in order to gain flexibility and local knowledge. We shaped our operations around a combination of wholly owned subsidiaries, joint ventures, partnerships, and strategic alliances, all involving local companies. This approach has served us particularly well in large, complex economies like China and India. 4 years ago, we began direct flights to Beijing and to Shanghai, and working with Sinotrans of China and Jet Air Limited in India, we've been able to methodically introduce services that met our customers' demands. That has helped us minimize our risk, and it proved to be an important factor in helping us ride out volatile economic swings in this fast-changing part of the world. It's also allowed us to manage our operations in a more flexible way and become stable and contributing to global economic development. And that leads to our second lesson: think local, but act global. We've heard that familiar phrase only backwards: think global and act local. Our experience today gives us the phrase a whole new twist. Despite what those anti-globalists try to protest, what we've seen among our business customers in markets from Santiago to Shanghai is the need to be connected to the global economy. There's no greater illustration of that today than China. Foreign direct investment is flooding into that nation from all corners of the globe. Just last week, 200 more companies opened up in China for the first time, joining 200,000 plus companies that already exist there today. That said, it would be foolish to assume that the global economy is going to create a homogeneous global culture and community. Nothing could be further from the truth. Being a local matters more now than ever before. At UPS, we have about 56,000 international employees, 56,000 UPSers working outside the U.S. Of that number, how many would you think are U.S. expatriates, Americans working outside of the U.S.? Only about 40. That's less than 0.1%. We've learned that everyone wins when we put international business operations into the hands of local people who best know their local cultures. I wish I could tell you that we've always understood that, but we've learned some lessons the hard way over years of trial and error. During the buildup of our business in Europe that I was involved with, we were challenged with integrating 16 acquired companies. That integration of those acquired companies into our organization was the biggest stumbling block to our international expansion during the late 1980s. Unfortunately, our first impulse was to behave more like commandos than teachers or partners or consultants. Our attitude was often just stand over there and watch us and watch what we do. In short, it was the UPS way or no way. And it didn't work, and our business suffered. Things only got better when we found the right blend of UPS culture, capabilities, and local knowledge. We knew we had acquired valuable operations in valuable markets. Our job should be make it better and not make it over. When we focused on coaching into areas of significant improvement that was needed and left the rest of those things to the local folks, we learned that local employees lend more credibility to local customer base because they understand the culture, the language, the systems, and the local business practices. We learned that acquired companies must assimilate to meet our needs, but at a pace they're comfortable with. And we think it's important to be flexible on some of the cultural traditions in order to create a climate for success for all of our people. For example, spiritual symbols are very important in Thailand. There, UPS displays Buddhist shrines in our buildings. Our drivers feel that protects them as they deliver packages. Similarly, we allow displays of the Blessed Mother in Argentina, Mexico, and Brazil. And of course, there are situations where you can't adapt to local customs, like where we're asked to compromise our values. We've had to tell our drivers in France there's no wine with lunch, and our drivers in Germany there's no beer with lunch. We have some things to learn. We've also been faced with a few situations when payoffs to government officials are normal cultural business practices, but that's not the UPS cultural business practice. It may have slowed our progress in some areas where we've held firm in our beliefs and taken great pains to communicate UPS's value throughout the global enterprise. Our code of business conduct is translated into 29 different languages and distributed to managers all around the world for yearly certification. Our policies and our procedures are subject to recurring training that reiterate that they come through a variety of media, including the internet sites, videotape addresses, and one-to-one conferences with executives. Last year, we surveyed our customers in Europe and Asia and Canada to get better insight into how they perceived our brand. And most of those attributes that they wrote back about were very human attributes. Words like decent and true and highly trained and respect and honor and service. Let me show you a couple of ways we've tried to humanize that UPS brand promise through our local advertising. We're building greater local empathy all at the same time. Both of these spots that I'm going to show you are aired across Europe, so let's take a look at those two spots.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
Hello.
Oh, hello.
At UPS, we don't just go by the book. We go beyond it. UPS. Consider it done.
Bonjour Philippe.
Déjà?
Service express. Merci. Bonne journée.
Bonne journée et bon appétit.
At UPS, we don't just go by the book. We go beyond it. UPS. Consider it done.
Another vital aspect of acting local is being perceived as a partner and an integrator as opposed to an extractor. In that third lesson, we've learned there's little tolerance for extractors as opportunists. Before I talk about being an integrator, let me tell you first about extractors. In the extraction model, companies might enter into a community, demand extravagant incentives from local governments, grab those resources, and then run if things go bad. And that happens too frequently. Conversely, the integrator approach is a two-way street. Integration means companies and communities align values and make meaningful contributions to create sustainable enterprises and communities. How does it work? Well, a UPS example is the way we developed our Asian Air Hub and that opened 2 years ago in Manila. The Asia Air Hub has become a vital part of our around-the-world network. It links Asia operations to our Europe operations from Cologne and our U.S. operations from here in Louisville. Just like our air hubs in Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Singapore, the Philippines hub is managed and operated by Asians and that is a major employer and an economic catalyst. In fact, the economic impact of the Philippines Air Hub has done nothing less than turn around the nation's credit rating, according to President Arroyo. She said that UPS Air Hub has taken the Philippines from a negative to a positive credit rating within the world banking community. At UPS, we like to think that we are part of a fundamental fabric of commerce and community. Clearly, the world's most powerful banker institutions also agree. In the Philippines and everywhere, corporate citizenship is just another component of responsible development. UPS has a global community investment grant funded by the UPS Foundation. And through a series of community grants, we perform hands-on efforts in localities around the world. Later this month, we will launch our third Global Philanthropy Day. Last year, thousands of UPS employees from 14 different countries outside the U.S. participated in a variety of volunteer efforts. Several of our senior executives helped build schools and computer labs in small rural communities of Poland and China. We built similar schools and computer learning laboratories in other Asian and Latin American countries. We pay close attention to the environment communities where we also operate. UPS is in the forefront of environmental responsibility, with recycled shipping material, the quietest and most fuel-efficient aircraft fleet in the air today, and a variety of fuel-efficient vehicles. Perhaps the greatest economic asset we can bring to a community, however, is that economic opportunity. We're obviously in somewhat of a unique position at UPS because of the nature of our business. In most markets, we're seen as part of the infrastructure of commerce, as much as any road or bridge, harbor, or airport. We've helped communities and businesses connect commerce so that it's an inherently positive brand halo that goes with this activity. And that's why the concept of enabling global commerce has become a centerpiece of our overall branding strategy. In many ways, our global journey at UPS is only beginning. But what we have learned so far about the importance of commitment, acting global but thinking local, and becoming part of community of commerce will bridge more than commerce. It will bridge people and cultures and lives. I think these same lessons will apply to all of you as you embark and progress on your careers. And whether you go to work for a multinational company, an NGO, or a small startup firm here in the Boston area, you will help shape the course of globalization in the coming years, and that you can count on. As business managers and leaders, you will also be part of a growing corporate diplomatic community. In the 21st century, corporate diplomacy is becoming just as important as political diplomacy. In fact, even more so. Our actions and our beliefs are not only shaping the perception of our companies, but are forming impressions about our nation and the ideals for which we stand. It's a big responsibility, one you must manage with care and diligence. I wish you all the best of luck on that journey, and thank you very much for having me speak today.
Thank you, Mike. Questions for Mr. Eskew, particularly from students? I know there are a couple of classes here who are studying globalization, so you may have some questions that come right out of your studies already. Yes? No, we need to get you on tape.
I can hear you, they can't.
I want to ask you, the oil prices is going, and you're saying you act locally, but you go globally. How oil prices affect UPS business?
Well, they're affecting us in a big way. Oil prices have gone up dramatically over the year, and we're big users of oil. When we think about what we do about that, luckily we run an integrated network. That same driver that delivers to this university also delivers to businesses and homes. They deliver integrated air and ground and air and international, all with the same driver. So we're able to optimize that fleet. We're able to trade off between ground and air and international and run a very tight operations. We've done a number of different things with different fuels. We run hybrid vehicles in California and New York and in Michigan. We run electric vehicles in Los Angeles. We run the largest CNG fleet, compressed natural gas fleet, private in the country. We have a large propane fleet in different parts of the world. We power our buildings with solar power. So we've done as much as we can, and we're going to try new things. But it's not new for us. We were running electric vehicles in New York in the 1940s. And so it's something we want to keep doing and keep finding ways to lessen the impact. Fuels have a big impact on us, and that has a big impact on our customers, and we'd like to find ways to minimize that impact.
It seems to me that the trend has been CEOs getting paid more and more. Do you think that it is justifiably ethical for CEOs to be making sometimes 300 or 400 times as much as their employees?
No, I don't. If you look at the way we pay ourselves at UP, we were a private company until 5 years ago. We've always paid ourselves modestly. I think if you would go to the internet and look up my pay, it would probably be some small percentage of what you talked about. I would be probably the 400 or 500th largest, highest paid CEO in the country today. I just looked at a poll in Georgia. In fact, in Atlanta, I was not in the top 25 in Atlanta, despite being the second largest company in Atlanta. So we try to pay ourselves modestly. I think I'm paid fairly, by the way. Anybody here from our board of directors? I shouldn't say this, but I would do this for nothing. This is a company I take home with me every day. It's a 33-year passion for us, and I think CEOs should be paid well, but I don't think they should be paid extravagantly.
Mike, can I follow up on that while either Dave or Jamie finds another student who wants to ask? Is there, if executive pay has gotten out of hand, which I think maybe indirectly you were agreeing with, is there any way that we can go about trying to get our hands around that problem?
Well, I think total transparency, I think, has made that one big part of it. When that's reported properly in terms of all the pay that CEOs or other executives, it's not just CEOs, by the way. There's an awful lot of folks in the investment banking community. There's an awful lot of folks in consulting companies that have truly, if we can make that much more transparent, so the people that pay us, our share owners, have that transparency, I believe that's going to go a long way.
There's somebody, well, Jamie, oh, okay, good, and I saw one way up in the back.
I was wondering, because obviously there's other companies out there as well, other than UPS, most like notably FedEx and DHL. So I was just wondering, when it comes to playing in the global market, exactly how you deal with this kind of an issue, because I'm sure there's always people wondering which to go with.
How do we deal with competition? Well, competition's a great thing. They've made us a better company. We've had to think about what we want, what our customers expect of us, and what they're going to expect of us in the future. We've transformed our companies to think, not just be a product company. A couple of those companies you mentioned were product companies. In other words, ground or air or international. We try to think about solutions. How do we make our customers better? And as we start thinking about unique ways to make customers better and take them to new lands and do great things so that they can reach their customers in better ways, we feel very good about how we stack up with competition.
I was wondering, you kept on talking about globalization, or each company should focus on local cultures. Do you see any potential problems, perhaps a company being too local, or how that's going to affect the corporate culture of the entire company?
You know, it's when we only have 40 people, 40 U.S. expatriates with 56,000. I'm not sure how much further we can go, but you know, there's something honest about what we do. I mean, there's something. I was in China not long ago, and there's the big things we do. The big things our people get that are really interesting. We all wear brown uniforms. They all deliver their brown package cars. We don't call them trucks, even in China. They all have that same information computer they carry so that we can transmit when a package was delivered in China and then upload it into the databases and share that technology. They do all that. They deliver the 8:30s by 8:30 and the 10:30s by 10:30. They do all those big things, but they do the little things. I saw one driver tap another one on the shoulder and said, "Come here." And they followed him over to the back of their package car and opened it up, and it was full of packages, which is a good thing. And they both went like this. And you think, where do they get these things? I mean, how do they get these little things? And that's what the gratifying thing. There's something noble. That sounds corny. But there's something honest about what UPS people do. That they're part of that transaction. They're the ones that delivered your package to China. And they're part of the chain that they do it. I had a nun that taught me in the 7th grade. And she looked out the window and across the playground where they were sandblasting the church. And she said to us, "I wish I had that job." And we said, "Sister, why is that?" And she said, "Because that person can see what they're accomplishing every day. I'm teaching you kids, and I think I'm accomplishing nothing." But that UPS driver feels like they've done something. And that transcends cultures. And it really does, I think, allows us to be able to be as thin as possible. Now, we have to have our values, and we're very clear about what our values are. But those are pretty simple values. You know, to tell the truth. You take your families and communities seriously, but not yourself. When you say you're going to do something, you do it. And you do the right thing, not the easy, the cheap, or the convenient thing. Those are simple values. If you do, and always put the customer first.
My question is, you were talking about globalization, and that's the key issue in 15 years from now, as you showed in your lecture. What are you doing as a CEO or the head of UPS to convince those people who are against the globalization, and what are you also doing politically to change the political issue of that? And from some of my personal experience, that the trends are happening because we are afraid that the big businesses are leaving United States and going overseas, and it did happen personally, and so a lot of people are afraid of that, and I don't know where I'm standing in this issue.
That's a good point. That's a fair point. What am I doing personally? We talked about those conferences. The first conference we ran, Bob Rubin looked to me, and he said, CEOs aren't doing enough to get the message out about why trade's good for everything else. He said, we're waiting for politicians to do this thing, and you folks aren't doing enough. Since that time, I've given a number of speeches all around about why trade's important. But I will also go back to your point, and I will always say, the trade by itself, I'm concerned about us becoming an isolationist country and saying trade's bad and putting walls up. I think that would be the worst thing we could do for your generation. But trade by itself isn't enough. We have to link trade with programs that take advantage, that help those folks that have lost their jobs because of trade. We have to create programs and initiatives that help those folks. Because I could tell you that the unemployment rate in the U.S. is 4%. But if you're one of those persons that have lost their job because of trade, to you it's 100%. And all the facts and figures that I give you don't go out the window when somebody raises their hand and said, yeah, but I've lost my job after 30 years. Those anecdotes sell, and they're true, and they're real. So we have to create programs that help the next generation, but also help those folks that have lost their jobs because of trade. And we have to think about your generation, how you can be in that next exciting part of living in a global world. The other thing we have to do is we have to think about infrastructure. We have to build better bridge and ports and highways and broadband and the things that are laws that are going to help us trade more fairly. and keep trade fair. So those two things are inextricably linked with global trade and can't be separated. Trade without those two, I think, is wrong.
Oh, yes. Would you grab that?
Hi, my name is Mauricio Dorson, and the question I want to ask you, in 2004 you were elected chairman of the U.S.-China Business Council, and my question is, I recently read that the European Union has put a tariff on textiles to China, and I was wondering if you can talk a little about this and what you think this would impact on global trade.
Well, I'm a big believer in free trade moving across countries. I think we've all benefited, both importers and exporting trade. It needs to be fair, and I'm not sure about how fair it is with textile. I'm not sure how fair it is between Europe and China in textile quotas. But people have to have a chance to compete equally on level playing fields in both things. But there is an economic division of labor that we need to move to over time. I mean, Henry Ford had a division of labor that he created with the conveyor belt that said it used to be it took 10 hours to build a car, and it cost a lot of money. But he put that division of labor where someone specialist put on wheels and someone specialist put on fenders and someone specialist put on the body. And it took that 10 hours down to 90 minutes. And it took the cost of a car down to something else. Trade, I believe, does that. It's been estimated since 1945 that the average U.S. family has benefited because of imports. Now, we're better buying power by $9,000. And exports, the growth in this economy over the last 2 years, 30% of that growth has been fueled by exports. I believe it is a great thing for overall benefit of commerce. But it's got to be fair. And I'm not sure about how fair it is between what those treaties are between Europe and China, but that needs to be fair.
I know we have given priority to students, but I shouldn't rule out any of our business executives and executive fellows at the center. Any questions over here? See, the students are much better. Oh,
CJ has a question.
We'll have one right here.
Thank you. You described very well the local culture and the organizational culture. Now, the local culture I don't have a problem with, even though culture as we know it is very difficult to change. But what was very interesting is the fact that you did identify the climate within your organization, which can be changed, and the major impact is through your leadership. So my question is, how do you deliver this message of the climate that your leaders have to, develop in the organization in order to encourage and motivate, just like that person who stopped eating to run to pick up the package. It's that type of thing, and I think that's where your oxymoron I think your company will definitely succeed, and it won't be an oxymoron because you have identified, I think you do know that organizational climate is not organizational culture.
Let me tell you what I think the ethics of just the essence of leadership is. Just the basic part. Leaders have to have a vision. I mean, and this is where we're going to go. This is how we're going to change the company. This is our vision. This is where we're going to take this company. In our company, we're going to become a one-to-one company. We're going to move from where we treated everybody the same to where we treat each package, each person, each customer, each transaction as if it's the only one we have. Your package, what we do for you, how we move you, how we make you successful. That's where we're going to go. And all 384,000 UPSers have to know we can't do it without you. If you don't do the things that you do, and you've got to say that every day. I talk about that every day, anywhere I go. This is our vision. This is where we're going to go. This is what it's going to take, and we can't do it without you. And Chip Barnes, who's with me today, who runs our local operations here in Massachusetts, does the same thing. He will go to those drivers and he will tell them, we can't make it without you. It's important that we do that thing. And I think that's how we spread that message, if that's the question you were after. Any questions?
Okay, yes, take that one. Maybe one more, and then we'll stop.
I had an opportunity to listen to the board member of Equal Exchange, who emphasized on fair trade rather than doing charity at the end of the business from the profits that you have extracted. Here, the things which I found common in what you said were long-term commitments and not to be seen as an extractor by the community. So can you give some examples, specific examples of how you have done something whereby the commitments is seen as long-term, especially in the context of developing countries?
Developing countries, sure. Well, I mean, the most long-term example I gave in that speech is we lost money for 22 years. That was a long-term commitment, and people kept waiting for us to. But we went to, and I've said this, and I mentioned the schools that we built in Poland and China. I was in Poland this summer, and I've been to China twice. And we don't go to Shanghai and we don't go to Beijing. We go to remote parts. I went to the Ukraine border in Poland, and I went to 2 small villages in China, Zunhua and Shibaipo. And we went out there with a group of about 40 UPSers and built schools for 2 and 3 days. Built computer workshops, put computers in, trained their teachers, let these kids see the world. I worked in Berlin in 1976. People from across the wall had no idea how the other side lived. They couldn't believe. When you would go over and describe the life we lived, it was like living on the moon. Now, it really was like you have a swimming pool at your hotel. They couldn't believe things like that. Now those kids in remote China, whose internet that we've wired, now can see what you wear, what you like, what music you listen to. I was very concerned about it when we went to the most remote part of Poland this summer. And these are people that have lived very simple lives for centuries. And is visibility right? I mean, that's something is this the good thing? And so when I dedicated that workshop, my wish to them was that you continue with the local traditions and local cultures, but in a world that's coming closer together, and it's important that you know those things. But those 2 villages, 3 villages we went to, and actually we did one in Mexico, it's going to be a long time before they see UPS in those remote villages. But they think different of all of us, corporate diplomacy. They think different of Americans and Westerners than they did before. And I think that's important they do that. I just have one wish, if that's all.
No, please.
When I was in your chairs, I had a favorite folk singer. His name was Bob Dylan. And he sang this song. Now, I'm not going to sing it. Although I could probably sing better than he does. But he sang this song. He said, "May your hands always be busy. May your feet always be swift. May you have a firm foundation when the winds of change shift. May your heart always be joyful. May your song always be sung. May you stay forever young." Great to be with you.
Mike, before you leave and before everybody else has to leave, I just wanted to give you this little token of our appreciation for your being our Raytheon Business Ethics Lecturer.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.